Carl never expected his first Christmas tree to bring anything but joy. It was supposed to be a quiet, cozy December, his first real attempt at making the holidays feel like home. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video. He'd picked out a lush green pine from a quaint little shop on the outskirts of town, thrilled at the idea of decorating it, and spending the season with something warm and cheerful in the corner of his living room. But within just 24 hours of bringing it home, something strange started happening. Red spots appeared all over Carl's body. At first, he blamed bedbugs. But what he found next would not only make his skin crawl, it would unravel a chilling conspiracy no one could have predicted. And when a local biologist took a closer look at his tree, he turned pale and immediately screamed. Carl's holiday cheer was about to turn into a horrifying, unforgettable mystery. It all began the morning after Carl brought the tree into his home. He woke up feeling itchy, irritated, and oddly uncomfortable. No matter how he shifted in bed, the feeling didn't go away. When he finally stood up and looked at his arms and torso, he saw something alarming: small red dots everywhere. They looked like tiny burns, as if he had somehow contracted a rash overnight. "It's got to be bedbugs," Carl muttered to himself, but when he flipped the mattress and combed through the sheets, he found nothing. Still scratching at his skin, Carl began inspecting the house-checking corners, carpets, and crevices for any signs of an infestation. That's when he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. A tiny, beetle-sized creature crawling across the kitchen floor. Curious and increasingly alarmed, Carl quickly trapped the bug in a clear container. Not knowing what he was dealing with, he reached out to a local biologist named Eric, someone he'd met at a local nature center and knew had a knack for identifying strange critters. Thankfully, Eric was available and came over right away. When Eric arrived, Carl showed him the container. The expert looked puzzled at first, turning the container over slowly, observing the small creature with narrowed eyes. Then, without saying a word, he started walking through the house, scanning surfaces and corners, looking for a trail, anything that might point to the creature's origin. And then, he spotted the Christmas tree. "How long has that been in your living room?" Eric asked, walking straight toward the towering pine. "Just yesterday," Carl replied, confused. "You don't think?" Eric didn't respond. He was already peeling back the branches, scanning between the pine needles. Then suddenly, he froze, stepped back, and screamed. His face drained of all color. "What is it? Is it that bad?" Carl asked, inching closer. Eric didn't speak for a moment, still stunned. "I think I found the source," he finally whispered, "and I also know what they are." Pushing the branches aside, Eric revealed the tree trunk. At first, Carl saw nothing, just the usual dark bark and pine texture. But as he followed Eric's pointed finger, his eyes adjusted. There barely visible were more of those beetle-like creatures. And then he saw something else. Clusters. Tiny white ovals, glistening in the light. Eggs. Thousands of them. Carl gasped and stumbled backward. "What the hell are they?" Eric explained that these weren't ordinary insects. "They're infant coconut crabs," he said. "And what you're looking at is a full-blown infestation. These eggs are going to hatch within days." Carl's jaw dropped. "Coconut crabs? But they're huge, right?" "Exactly," Eric replied. "Adults can weigh over 10 pounds, but these are just baby larvae. What's worse is that they release spores as they grow. That's what's causing the skin irritation." But something still didn't add up. Coconut crabs aren't native to Carl's region. They typically live near the Indian or Pacific Oceans places like Indonesia or coastal Australia. How could a Christmas tree in a small American town be infested with thousands of tropical crabs? That's when Carl remembered something odd about how the tree had been delivered. He explained to Eric that he had picked out the tree at a shop on the edge of town. It was a small business, cluttered with winter gear, groceries, and knickknacks. The salesman told Carl he'd deliver the tree, fully decorated lights, ornaments, and all. Carl thought it was strange that the salesman offered full installation service himself, especially after claiming to run the store alone. Even stranger, the installation had taken nearly 2 hours. Carl had expected the salesman to drop off the tree, plug in the lights, and leave. But instead, the man had spent an inordinate amount of time setting up the already decorated pine. Carl had walked into the living room several times, curious about the delay, but never suspected anything unusual until now. Was he planting those eggs in the tree? Carl asked aloud. Eric didn't have an answer, but both men agreed on one thing. They had to confront the salesman. Together, they drove 30 minutes to the shop where Carl had bought the tree, but when they arrived, the place was deserted. The once busy storefront was now empty, the windows dark, the shelves bare. It didn't make sense. Just a few days ago, the store had been full of inventory. Carl pushed on the glass door. It swung open. Inside, it looked like a ghost town. Rows of empty shelves, dust on the floor. But in the back room, they found something chilling. More coconut crab hatchlings. And more eggs. They weren't just dealing with a pest problem, they were dealing with a criminal operation. Suddenly, they spotted an elderly woman walking her dog nearby. They rushed outside to ask her if she knew what had happened to the store. She told them the owner had suddenly cleared everything out last week, vanished overnight. That's not all, she added. There's been a string of robberies lately. People calling exterminators after noticing red spots or getting trees, then coming back to find their homes empty. Carl and Eric froze. The salesman hadn't just planted crab egg, she was part of a scam. The tree and the infestation were just a distraction. The real plan? Rob people blind while they were out of the house dealing with the infestation. Carl's blood ran cold. And when they returned to Carl's neighborhood, their worst fears were confirmed. Carl's neighborhood was in chaos. As he and Eric pulled into his street, flashing red and blue lights from multiple police cars lit up the dusk. People were running around, crying, panicking. His quiet street had turned into a crime scene. Carl jumped out of the car and raced to his driveway. That's when he saw his neighbor, Miss Landry, collapsed on the sidewalk, sobbing into her hands. He recognized her from across the street, but they had never spoken. Now, as he approached, Carl saw just how devastated she was. "Miss Landry, what happened here?" Carl asked gently. She looked up, her eyes puffy from crying, and for a moment, rage replaced her tears. "I've been robbed!" she screamed. "They took everything, everything!" Police officers quickly stepped in, trying to calm her down. She kept yelling, describing how her home had been completely cleaned out, every drawer, every cabinet, every memory. Even her deceased son's high school trophies were gone. As she shouted through her sobs, something clicked in Carl's mind. He looked closer at her and saw it the telltale sign. She was scratching her arms furiously, and when she moved the tissue away from her face, Carl's stomach dropped. Her arms were covered in red, irritated dots, just like his had been. "Did you get a Christmas tree recently?" Carl asked, trying to keep his voice calm. She looked confused, but nodded. "Was it from a place on Edgewood Street?" Another nod. "And after bringing it home, you started getting itchy? Thought maybe it was bed bugs?" This time, her expression changed from confusion to stunned realization. How do you know that?" Carl took a breath. "Because the exact same thing happened to me, and I think I know who robbed you." He rushed home and returned with the transparent container holding the coconut crab he'd caught earlier. The police officers gathered around as he explained everything, the crab eggs, the bizarre salesman, the so-called extermination service. "You weren't robbed by strangers breaking in," Carl said. "You were robbed by the people you called to get rid of the bugs." At first, the officers were skeptical, but Carl was prepared. "Do you still have the number you used to call the exterminators?" he asked Miss Brasted. "Landry." She pulled it up on her phone and showed it to him. Carl dialed it. It rang for almost a full minute, and then someone answered. Carl recognized the voice not the salesman who had delivered his tree, but someone else. Still, it was proof that the operation was active. "Yes, I need extermination services. I've got a major infestation," Carl said smoothly. "Can you come by this afternoon?" The voice on the other end agreed. The trap was set. Carl turned to the police. "They're coming to my house." The officers immediately got to work. They instructed nearby residents to stay inside and swapped out their marked vehicles for unmarked ones to avoid suspicion. Inside Carl's home, they took position some hidden under tarps, others stationed at the back entrance. It was going to be an ambush, and it had to be perfect. Later that day, the extermination crew arrived 3 men in white suits with clipboards, playing the role convincingly. But not convincingly enough for Carl, who now saw through every word. "This'll take all day," one of them told him. "You'll need to vacate for safety." Carl nodded and stepped out. But instead of leaving, he ducked into his neighbor's empty house across the street. From there, he watched. The men began their work, throwing a giant tarp over Carl's home. Then came the second wave unmarked vans, pulling up to the curb. They backed right up to the house and opened their doors. Inside were empty crates, boxes, and bags ready to be filled with Carl's belongings. But this time, they wouldn't get far. The moment the criminals started moving Carl's possessions, the trap was sprung. Officers hidden inside his home burst out from under the tarp. Shouts echoed through the house. "Police! Drop everything!" Panic erupted. The thieves tried to run, dropping valuables as they fled. But as they stormed toward the front door, thinking they had a way out, they were met by another surprise, an entire squad of officers standing outside, blocking every possible exit. One by one, the criminals were tackled, cuffed, and dragged into waiting patrol cars. Carl and Miss Landry watched from across the street, her hands trembling, tears now flowing, not from grief but from relief. And then Carl saw him. Among the handcuffed criminals, Carl spotted a familiar face, the man who had sold him the tree. He turned to Miss Landry. "Is that?" she gasped. "That's him. That's the man who came to my house." With the ringleader now in custody, the pieces of the puzzle finally came together. Later, during questioning, the suspects revealed even more. Not only had they used crab-infested trees as distractions, they had also created a lab-like environment in the back of their store to breed the coconut crabs. These were no ordinary thieves. They were running a full-blown operation, smuggling exotic species and using them as tools in a bizarre, elaborate robbery scheme. The police were stunned. In all their years, they'd never seen anything like it. They soon tracked down a rented warehouse nearby filled with stolen goods. Items from over 26 homes were recovered, including Ms. Landry's son's trophies. Most victims got their belongings back, and the rest were compensated by court-ordered fines. Carl and Ms. Landry later testified in court. Thanks to their bravery, the criminals received long sentences. Justice had been served.